All right, so let's go ahead and talk about importing data. So far, we've really been covering things around just some basic fundamentals of working with the R programming language, data structures, data types. We looked at how can we actually have a reproducible workflow. But now we're starting to get into the lessons that are really focused on doing data science or data wrangling activities. So the first step in this sequence of tasks that we need to do for data analysis is importing data, actually getting the data from their raw source files into R so we can do some analysis. All right, so what we're going to focus on in this lesson is really importing CSV files, Excel files, and then also talk about how we can import larger data sets more efficiently. Now, in the reading lesson, we go into more details around how you can import some other data types, such as if you want to connect to a SQL database, or if you want to import some JSON data. So definitely take a look at those. But for right now, we're going to look at these basic ones because these are probably the most common for us to kind of get started in importing data. Now, the thing to realize is that all these different packages we're going to use to import data, they have one main common characteristic. When they import the data is imported as a data frame, right? So we're importing it from some raw source file, and it's going to be imported into R as a data frame. Excuse me. All right, so let's look at how do we import just a basic delimited file. The most common one is a CSV file. So we're going to use the readr library. Now, the thing to realize is that there is a built-in read.csv function within R. You can use that, but there's some issues with it that are a little bit tedious. So we prefer to use the readr package, which provides a read_CSV function. Right. So then all we need to do is really pass the path to our file. In this case, you could point it to the products CSV file, which is included in the downloads for this lesson. And we can import. And we see that when we do that, we get some information. It tells us how many rows and how many columns it parsed from this file. And it gives you the names of those rows. And then we can look at the end product and we can see we have a data frame that's got about 151,000 rows and there are 5 columns. Okay, so nothing too complicated here, pretty simple. Now, what if we have our data in an Excel spreadsheet within an Excel file? Well, to do that, what we can do is we can use the read Excel package. And there's kind of 2 steps that we take when we're doing reading data from an Excel file. The first one is to understand what spreadsheets are available within the file. Because if you remember, or I'm sure you're familiar with Excel, you can have many different sheets within an Excel file. So if we use this Excel_sheets function and pass it the path to our Excel file, it is going to return all the different spreadsheets or tabs within that file, right? So this will allow us to identify, well, which of these files do we want, or which of these spreadsheets do we want to import? The next step is to go ahead and use read_Excel, this function, pass it the path, and then we can pass it the sheet name, right? So up here, when we looked at the different sheets available, we probably saw, products data. This is probably the one we want to import. Then we pass that to the sheet argument here. Now, if you don't pass an argument to this sheet parameter, then by default, it'll read in the first spreadsheet in that file. Now, both readr and readExcel provide lots of different parameters that we can use to make adjustments when we are importing data. Well, first of all, within readr, we can actually read in both not just CSV files, but also tab-separated files, text files, fixed width files, and many other different delimited file formats. Now, in both of these cases, for readExcel and readr, we can change the column names when we import them in. We can actually change the data type. So if we have a numeric, like a column that has numeric data, we could actually explicitly state we want to import that as a character column if we wanted to. We can skip lines. This is common within Excel spreadsheets where you have some information at the top that explains what the sheet is about, and then the actual data starts maybe 5 rows down. So we could always skip the first 4 rows and then start importing. And we can actually explicitly state how to label missing values. So there's lots of different options here. You can always go ahead and do comma and then the function, and that's going to give you all the different arguments you can check out to change the options when you're importing data. All right, so what if we have a very large file? For example, here is a data set that I've worked with before at work. It has under 1 million observations, so it's not that long, but we have 723 variables. So this equates to over 600 million elements, and that ends up being about 2.7 gigabytes. So it's a very wide data set, and it ends up being quite large. Well, here's the problem. If you were to try to read this in with the built-in read.csv function that I mentioned earlier, this is going to take close to a half an hour, right? This is how many seconds. So it'll be close to half an hour before this actually gets completely imported into R. Now, if you use the readr package in the read_CSV, this cuts this down to 10 minutes. So one of the benefits of read_CSV compared to the built-in read.csv is just how efficient it is in importing the data. Now that's still 10 minutes that you're just wasting as data gets imported into R. So there is 2 options. One is a package called data.table, and it provides a function called fast read, right? Another package, which I mentioned in the reading lesson, is the vroom package. Both of these packages are designed to be very efficient and to basically use C to do a lot of the importing functionality. And we can see that when we import with data.table and the fread function, it actually takes just a tad over 1 minute to import. Right? So we have cut our importing time down from half an hour down to 1 minute. All right, so I want you to take a break, and what I want you to do is to go ahead and read in the transactions.csv file and save this as transactions. And this transactions data will be in the supplementary files you downloaded for this lesson. All right, so a couple different ways you could have done it. You could have done it with read_CSV, and that would have been just fine. This is a little bit of a larger data file. So what I did here was I used data.table and I used fread. All right, so one thing to note is, depending on if you imported this with data.table and fread or the readr package with the read_CSV function, the results look a little bit different, right? You can see on the left, we have this data frame, and on the right, we have pretty similar output, except it says a tibble, right? So we have slightly different things, and we can see here that on the right, it only prints out, the first 10 rows, and we get our columns there. Where on the left, it prints out actually the first 111 rows. All right, so here's one of the big differences between a data frame and a tibble, okay? So a tibble is actually a data frame. There's really not any differences other than the fact that a tibble will print out a little bit more nicely, right? So rather than print out the first 111 observations, really we don't need to do that. A tibble is going to print out only the first 10. And also, if we have a very wide data set, a tibble prints out much more nicely than a regular data frame. So just remember that a tibble is the same thing as a data frame. It's just formatted more nicely. And if you ever have a data frame that you want to turn into a tibble, just for that better printing characteristic, we can always take the data frame. For example, here's the transactions, and I can always use this tibble package which got installed when you installed Tidyverse, and you can just do as Tibble and transactions, and that will change it into a Tibble. All right, there are some alternative approaches. One is you could use this file choose function here. So let me go ahead. If I were to do file choose and run that, what actually happens is it pops up a window where I can go into, let's say, the data directory, and I could pick out, let's see, transactions. I could pick out the data set that I want to import, right? So that's one alternative. Also, RStudio has an option. Within RStudio, I can go to, let me pull up my environment window here, and there's this import dataset option here. I could import, and I could select import a text file using readr. It'll open up this window. I could interactively go in, select my transactions file, and then I can also do a bunch of different options here where I could change certain parameters within this importing, right? And this is all fine and dandy. One of the problems is that this is interactive and it's not reproducible. So if you do this option and you don't put the process of importing that data within your script, then you won't be able to reproduce that function of importing the data, which is really what we want. All right, so what I want you to do now is just run through these lines of code and test it out on your imported transactions data. This is going to show you a few different things, such as the dimensions of your data. It'll give you a quick glimpse of what the data looks like. You can get the names of your data. You can get how many missing values exist, and so on. So just kind of run through these. You can pause the video and kind of see what each one of these does. This gives you kind of your initial interactions with this data frame, and future lessons are really going to allow us time to kind of dig into how do we dissect and analyze our data frame. All right, so there's many other file types that we save data, and you're going to run into these. Bottom line is just get comfortable with working with new file types, and pretty much all these different types of files that store data. There's pretty much an R package that allows us to interact with them and import data. And several of these will be illustrated in the reading lesson, so go ahead and check that out. All right, key things to remember here. The readr package is what we primarily use for importing delimited files. readxl is fantastic for importing Excel files. I highly recommend you check out data.table and the vroom packages to import very large data sets. You'll notice that a lot of the stuff we import will be imported as Tibbles. Just keep in mind, Tibbles are the same thing as a data frame. They just print out more nicely. And like I said before, there's many other file types that can hold data and that we need to import data from. And there's lots of R packages that provide that capability. All right, you got questions? First of all, read through the lesson, reading for this particular lesson, and then if you still have additional questions, hit up the discussion board on Canvas.